responsible for turning the pages. Oh, okay. Hi kids, this is a story from Grandma. It's a story about Little Red Riding Hood. I hope you enjoy it. There was once a little girl who had no brothers or sisters. She lived with her father and mother in a pretty little cottage at the edge of the village. At the further end of the wood, which came to the end of the village, was another pretty cottage, and in it lived her grandmother. Everybody loved this little girl. Her grandmother perhaps loved her the most of all, and gave her a great many pretty things. Once she gave her a red cloak with a hood, which she always wore afterwards, so people called her Little Red Riding Hood. One morning, Little Red Riding Hood's mother said, "Put on your things and go see your grandmother. She's been ill. Take this basket for her. I had put in it eggs, butter, cake, and other dainties." Now Red Riding Hood did not run, or you do not run, Red Riding Hood, or you will break the eggs, but you must not waste time on the way. Then kissing her goodbye, she started out on her journey. It was a bright and sunny morning. Red Riding Hood was so happy that at first she wanted to dance through the wood. She remembered, however, what her mother had said. Soon her steps grew slower and slower. There were so many things to listen to. There was a little brook, there was the song of the birds, the hum of the bees, and far away there was the sound of her father's axe as he cut the branches from the trees. There were so many things to watch. There was the little squirrels jumping from branch to branch, the rabbits nibbling the tender ferns, and far away the blue smoke from her grandmother's cottage. All around her grew pretty wild flowers, which she loved, and she stopped to pick a bunch of them for her grandmother. Little Red Riding Hood wandered from the path and was stopping to pick a flower when from behind her a gruff voice said, "Good morning, Red Riding Hood." Little Red Riding Hood turned around and saw a great big wolf, but as she did not know what a wicked beast the wolf was, she was not afraid and replied, "Good morning, Mr. Wolf. What have you in the basket?" Little Red Riding Hood. "Eggs and butter and cake, Mr. Wolf." "Where are you going with them, Red Riding Hood?" "I'm going to my grandmother who is ill, Mr. Wolf." "Where does your grandmother live, Little Red Riding Hood?" "Along that path, past the wild rose bushes, then through the gate at the end of the wood, Mr. Wolf." Then Mr. Wolf again said, "Good morning," and set off through the wood, and Little Red Riding Hood continued her search for flowers. Now, though Mr. Wolf, as he trotted along, thought that the little girl will taste very sweet, it is good plan to keep her to the end. I shall eat up the old grandmother first. On he went, and at last reached the porch covered with flowers, and knocked at the cottage door. "Who's there?" called the grandmother. "Little Red Riding Hood," said the wicked wolf. "Press the latch, open the door, and walk in," said grandmother. The wolf pressed the latch upon the door and walked in where the grandmother lay in bed ill. She was dreadfully frightened, as you can imagine, when she saw the wolf instead of her grandchild. But the wolf did not give her much time to wonder. He was about to spring upon her when she hastened into a clothes closet that was by her side. When Mr. Wolf found he had lost a good dinner, he put on grandmother's nightcap, which she had dropped in her haste, and then crept under the bedclothes. In a short while, Little Red Riding Hood arrived at the house. She knocked at the door and walked in, saying, "Good morning, grandmother. I brought you fresh eggs and butter and cake from my mother, and here's a bunch of flowers I gathered in the wood. I hope you're feeling better." As she came near the bed, she said, "What big ears you have, grandmother." "All the better to hear you with, my dear." "What big eyes you have, grandmother." "All the better to see you with, my dear." But grandmother, what a big nose you have." all the better to smell you with, my dear. And what big teeth you have, Grandmother. All the better to eat you up with, my dear. And with these words, the wicked wolf sprang at Little Red Riding Hood. Just at that moment, Little Red Riding Hood's father was passing the cottage and heard her scream. He rushed in and with one blow knocked Mr. Wolf right out the front door. Everybody was happy that Little Red Riding Hood and her grandmother had escaped the wolf. Then Little Red Riding Hood's father took her home and they lived happily ever after.